Distinguished participants, good morning and good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's workshop, Understanding the Contributions of Citizen Science to Plastic Pollution Monitoring through the SDG Framework. Citizen science has come of age in the last couple of decades, as the widespread use of internet-connected devices such as smartphones and laptops allow large numbers of people to report on their environment. The United Nations Environment Programme recognizes the untapped potential of citizen science to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 1411B, which measures plastic debris density through beach litter. However, despite the proliferation of on-the-ground activities, more work is needed to understand how existing data and new activities can most effectively contribute to SDG reporting efforts. One goal of this workshop is to elucidate these opportunities. Following this workshop, new guidelines produced with UNEP and partners will identify more concrete opportunities, including recommendations on data collection and analysis for leveraging citizen science for SDG 1411B. With this background in mind, I will now give the floor to a representative from the United Nations Environment Programme, followed by our co-hosts, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, or IIASA, and Ocean Conservancy, to give their opening remarks.
Thank you, Anne. This is Danny Ghaffari from the SDG and Environment Statistics Unit. I'll be representing UNEP in the opening remarks since Lud was not able to join. Good morning, good day, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this workshop that looks at the contributions of citizen science to plastic pollution monitoring through the SDG framework. When the 2030 agenda was adopted by all member states in 2015, the world signed up to a path leading to a sustainable future. Shortly after, in 2016, the SDG monitoring framework was adopted so that progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals can be reviewed. To know whether our actions also lead to achieving the objectives the world has set, it's critical to have reliable, timely, comprehensive, consistent data available. In comparison to the social and economic statistics, environment statistics are a relatively new field. Traditionally, official statistics have been based on data that are officially collected by national governments through surveys, censuses, official census. Already in 2014, the Interagency and Expert Group on SDG stated that using only traditional data sources create a barrier for countries to monitor and assess progress through the SDGs, particularly for developing countries. It's widely recognized that effective monitoring of the SDGs will require the use of new data sources and data techniques. One of those new data sources comes from the citizen science and can be used for SDG monitoring and reporting. Including citizen science and data to monitor the SDGs may provide data at local level and inform about variation over shorter time frames. That allows for better disaggregation of data and thus a better understanding of the issues at hand, thus improving policy and decision-making to address problems. Realizing the full potential of citizen science requires demonstrating its value in the global data ecosystem. Building partnerships around the citizen science data to accelerate the SDG progress is necessary to success. Leveraging investment is crucial to enhance its use and impact. This workshop aims at looking at the role of citizen science in specific area of monitoring plastics. I hope you will enjoy diving deeper into this existing subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Anne. I think this is a very timely workshop, and at IIASA, we're very happy to be part of it. My name is Dilek Freisel, and I'm a researcher at the Center for Earth Observation and Citizen Science at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA, based in Austria. And I'm the chair of a community of practice established as part of a European Commission funded project called We Observe SDGs and Citizen Science Community of Practice, or the SDG Scope in short. So the SDG Scope is an open platform that connects the UN and other international agency representatives, national statistical offices and government officials, and of course citizen science practitioners and researchers to leverage citizen science data and impact for the SDGs. The objective of the SDG Scope actually summarizes our interests at IASA on this topic as well. So as part of the We Observe SDG Scope, we published a paper that systematically reviews, analyzes, and maps the existing and potential contributions of citizen science data to the SDG indicators. And one of the main findings of our work published in Sustainability Science was that citizen science data are already contributing to the monitoring of 5 SDG indicators, such as 2 indicators on protected areas and the indicator on marine litter through the Litter Intelligence Program in New Zealand, for example, that Camden will talk about today. We also identified that citizen science data have the potential to contribute to 76 SDG indicators, and this is around 33% of the SDG indicators in total, as there were 244 SDG indicators when we undertook this study, and this number is changing and currently 247. So this is, as I said, again, around 33% of the SDG indicators. And this is a great potential, especially when the data gaps in the SDG indicator framework are considered. For example, there are 93 environmental SDG indicators, and almost 70% of them lack data, according to the 2019 Measuring Progress report of UNEP. But the good news is that our study also shows the greatest contributions from citizen science data to the SDG indicator framework would be in environmental SDG indicators. And this is our motivation since the beginning to get involved with UNEP and others in discussions around monitoring marine litter using citizen science approaches as part of the indicator 14.1.1, which has a tremendous potential for contributing to SDG monitoring globally. So in order to act on the results of our research together with UN SDSN and Ghana Statistical Service, at IASA we initiated Citizen Science for the SDGs, or CS for SDGs project, for which we also partnered up with UNEP, the Wilson Center, Ocean Conservancy, and the Smart Nature Freak Youth Volunteer Foundation in Ghana along the way, as they are the key partners in the field, and without them this project wouldn't be very impactful or even possible. So we will hear from the Ghana Statistical Service on the CS4 SDGs project in detail shortly, so I'm not going to go into details now, but I'm happy to answer if you have any questions during the discussions part, and I will now add relevant links I talked about in the chat. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Allison Schutz, and I am from the Ocean Conservancy, and we are just simply so excited to be joining these incredible presenters and really be working with all of you distinguished guests. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We understand that it is insane times all around the world, and I think the fact that people are joining from these really interesting and tough time zones right now really speak to the importance of data and how impactful data, such as those we're going to be talking about today, can really change the world and really help us measure our impact and our progress towards the SDGs. At Ocean Conservancy, we have had the pleasure for 35 years to be working with organizations all around the world and incredibly passionate volunteers to record data about the marine debris they're finding along their shorelines and in their waterways. So we are just so excited to be able to work with you, have these important conversations to see how we can further the impact of these data. We have been lucky enough to see how these data can really make a difference, how they can inform policy, how they can really make systemic changes. And so we are just excited to be here, excited to be able to be speaking with such incredible and passionate individuals. And we just really can't wait to get this workshop started. So thank you for having us. Thank you for joining. And thank you for the UN Environment Program for putting this all together. We're excited to jump in.
Thank you to Danny, thank you to Dilek, and thank you to Allison for so effectively setting the scene. I now wish to invite the first presenter, Danny Ghaffari, to introduce you to SDG 1411B reporting requirements. Danny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne. This is a quick presentation on the data requirement for SDG 1411B. Next slide, please. Okay, actually, I will start from bottom up. Indicator 1411B, plastic debris density. It's a sub-indicator of indicator 1411 on index of coastal eutrophication and floating plastic debris density. Under a target of 14.1 by 2025, prevent and significantly reduce marine pollution of all kinds, in particular from land-based activity, including marine debris and nutrition pollution. And then under goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development goal. So this is the structure of the SDG indicator 1411B under 1411, target 14.1, and goal 14. Next slide, please. Martha? Okay, thank you. Why is this indicator, this SDG indicator is important? Plastic pollution is most widespread problem affecting the marine environment. It's also threatens ocean health, food safety, and quality. Human health, food safety, quality, human health, coastal tourism, and contributes to the climate change. According to UNESCO, IOC, there are also 4 main types of indicator for marine litter that can be measured. We have the plastic debris washed, deposited on beaches and shoreline, beach litter, plastic debris in the water column, plastic debris on the seafloor, seabed, plastic ingested by biota, example, sea birds. Next slide, please. This indicator also, you're going to see in under SDG indicator 14.1, we have 2 sub-indicators. We have the 14.1A on eutrophication. We have also a definition of EEZ. You will see a lot of EEZ when measuring 14.11A, 14.11B, and the definition of marine litter. The eutrophication is the excess of nutrition loading into coastal environment, resulting in excessive growth of plants, algae, and phytoplankton. Coastal zone is the 200 nautical miles from the coast. It's a national exclusive economic zone, as outlined by the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. We have also the marine litter. It's any persistent manufactured or processed solid material which is lost or discarded and ends up in the marine and the coastal environment. Next slide, please. The limitation, it's assumed that countries would use the data actively for decision making, but as oceans are transboundary, it makes this decision making complex. So this is the limitation of this indicator. Next slide, please. For this indicator, actually, we're going to measure for this level 1 and level 2. Level 1 and level 2 is the type of data we're going to measure. Level 1, it's the data that are going to be measured globally using some Earth observations, remote sensing, and modeling. And for level 2 data, it's the data that are coming directly from countries, will be collected directly from countries through the relevant regional seas where applicable for the countries that are part or members of the regional seas program. We have some monitoring parameters for marine plastic litters to track progress against the SDG indicator 14.1. In this table, you see the different level of data that are required to be collected. We have under level 1, we have 2 sub-indicators. A plastic patch is greater than 10 meters. Beach litter originates from national land-based sources. So this level 1 data or level 1 sub-indicators are not part of, we are not going to cover during our workshop today. The main focus on during the workshop of today is the second level data, the level 2 data, which are the beach litter, beach surveys, floating plastics, water column plastics, and seafloor litter. Next slide, please. Okay, beach litter. The purpose of for our workshop today is to cover beach litter and how the citizen science can contribute actually for to measure the beach litter under the SDG indicator 1411B. Beach litter survey following the UNEP IOC UNESCO operational guidelines are the source of the statistical data can be the source of the statistical data for this indicator. National efforts to collect data on beach litter can be supported by campaigns to engage members of the public as volunteers in beach cleanups and citizen science programs. Specific instructions on how to conduct citizen science beach surveys are included in the GAZAM guidelines 2019. They provide resources on previous citizen science projects and guidance for ensuring sound data collection and management with citizen science. So it's good, actually, we have some guidelines to base our surveys when we are doing some beach cleanup. Next slide, please. It's important to consider the timing of the surveys in order to properly plan effective surveys. Two main types of surveys beaches include a rapid assessment survey best conducted in response to natural disaster to build a baseline for future surveys and to identify beach litter hotspots. Routine shoreline monitoring. The average count of plastic items can be computed for each area sampled. Next slide, please. The data for this indicator, we have different data sources, can vary from national government, citizen science projects. The data collection through national surveys, public campaign, and citizen science projects. Data will be available for all member states. We are hoping that the first data reporting is expected to be compiled in 2021, so we can report for this indicator. Data is already being collected. I have seen 3 different data sets from 3 different citizen science projects. So data is already being collected. We want to discover during this workshop how it was collected, which guidelines were used during the collection or during the cleanups, and so on, to get a better idea if this data can be used for the SDG 1411B reporting. Data processing will be handling by UNEP and partners. Next slide, please. Okay, here in this slide, I'm covering the step-by-step, guide on for the SDG indicator 1411 data collection. The proxy indicator is beach litter. The methodology is beach litter surveys following the UNEP IOC UNESCO operational guidelines. The step 1, we need to identify the national authority responsible for gathering the data and reporting on marine pollution, and the agency organization responsible for implementing beach litter surveys. This is step 1. Step 2, we need to explore the use of existing data which is being collected by citizen science initiatives and beach cleanups. We are actually covering in this workshop the step 2, we are exploring the use of the existing data. Step 3, we to conduct beach litter surveys following the UNEP IOC UNESCO operation guidelines, which are provided in Appendix 4. I have included the link, I will include the link, or I will share the links for this UNEP IOC UNESCO operational guidelines. Next slide, please. Okay, in summary, beach litter is the core parameter that all countries should monitor and report on. Where in-country capacity or opportunities exist to conduct more or extensive marine litter monitoring, country can also conduct surveys of floating plastics, plastics on the seafloor, or microplastics. There's an urgent need to increase plastic awareness about the adverse effect of plastic pollution on marine ecosystem and resources. Involving stakeholders will help in creation of action plans. The GAZAM guidelines will provide the key information for the development of a methodology for this agreed SDG indicator, which may combine in situ data and modeling surface water circulation. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Danny, for the foundational presentation that you just gave. We will now proceed with a short series of presentations from 3 citizen science projects on their activities, protocols, and data. Today, we will hear presentations from Mustafa Aydin from the European Environmental Agency, Hilary Burgess from National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and Sarah Kohler from the Ocean Conservancy. Each presenter will introduce his or her organization, Citizen Science Projects, briefly, also providing information on protocols for data collection and additional information. Following these presentations, we will have a moderated discussion. Please type your questions in the chat box at any point in time, and we will select questions at the end. Mustafa, Hilary, and Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Mustafa Aydin from European Environment Agency. The EEA is an agency which works for the European Commission. Our aim is to inform the policymakers with reliable and timely information, and also the European public. We work on the environment for more than 25 years. Our Marine Litter Watch project is a community/citizen science project. Next slide, please. Which we have more than 40 big European communities or community networks, NGO networks, which works with us together. Plus, individuals can also use our app and enter beach litter surveys into our database. We collect beach litter data, which is in European Marine Strategy Framework Directive defined as the items bigger than 2.5 centimeters. And then we use European Union Technical Group on Marine Litter joint list of litter. More than 200 items are listed, and this list is currently being also updated. We use this list to register our items, and we share our data with the IMODNet data portal of the European Union to help the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and single-use plastics monitoring, in addition to the complementary data, in addition to the member states data. And whereas the member states data do not exist, Marine Litter Watch data is being used, and we consist more than 2 million litter items since 2023. And we are now becoming more global with the Blue Flag initiative. Some countries will start to, from worldwide, to also put their data surveys in a regular basis to our database. And we believe this NGO experience is great because we have something in between for the real monitoring and then cleanup events. And I believe that this provides a lot of good value to our data. We use 100-meter strip to monitor our data, and then in an efficient way with the more monitoring type of NGO surveys, which are done at the same beaches and every year. And some other surveys are can be called as cleanup. Even they're also professional efforts. They don't necessarily apply the full joint list or full 100-meter criteria. Next slide, please. And we provide, as I said, complementary data to EU MSFT and sub-directives, and support EEA beach litter indicator bases and marine litter assessments in European level and EEA level. And with this initiative also, together with you, we are proud and happy that our data will be used for SDG 14.1 monitoring, which we believe in this kind of professional efforts also, and the citizen science activities and the value of the data they create. And we have a pan-European collective working, and we also use Marine Litter Watch for the public awareness rising at the moment, especially in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Our communities use Marine Litter Watch as a good tool for the awareness rising of the NGOs and the public. Next slide, please. So how we work, you can join and create a community. You can download our app from the App Store or Google Store, and then Marine Litter Watch app, and then join and create a community and carry out a survey. And then this app will show where did you do the survey, and use our list to register the results of survey. Then it goes to our database, and then we provide results on our web page, and then use and share this information. Our data is open source data. You can just download our database from our web page. Next slide, please. And here you see our data viewer and the results. These results are not quality checked results. After these efforts, it's directly, once you register, it's seen our system. As you see that we have more than 3,000 surveys in all over the Europe, and then you can also see the results of your own collection efforts or the whole efforts, the amount of plastics, types of the plastics, single-use plastics simultaneously once you enter the data. And then we make a quality check, additional quality check by our partners, and then we provide yearly basis of assessment with the quality check data and share this data, more official data platform, EMODNet, to be used for the European Union policies. Next slide, please. So our first assessment was in 2017. Very recently, we have published, you can find and download in this address, a quality checked assessment of our data and comparison of the European seas. And we have answered these 4 main questions on our data. We are looking now, after 6-7 years of good data collection effort, looking now for some trends in our data and comparisons between the seas, trends in single-use plastics, type of plastics, and the amount of plastics, and the abundance of litter at the European seas. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is finished. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hilary Burgess. I am with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States. Our agency is a science and natural resource management agency based on the ocean and the atmosphere, and I'm with the Marine Debris Program. And the Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project, or MDMAP, is our primary shoreline monitoring tool and program. And it is primarily a citizen science initiative that engages partners to volunteer in shoreline surveys using a standardized monitoring protocol to document and understand the changes in quantity and composition of items on the beach or other shorelines. So looking at things that are about a bottle cap size or larger. Next slide, please. So the MDMAP has a series of kind of interleaving goals, primarily to guide and evaluate prevention and mitigation of marine debris, but essentially to create a rigorous and robust protocol and set of tools to support research and science-based policies and scientific studies to be robust enough to be used in a policy context, but also approachable and flexible enough to be conducted by a diverse audience, including our own agency staff, other agencies, nonprofit organizations, NGOs, school groups, etc. And essentially, through the standardized protocol, we detect spatial and changes over time in debris loads by material and type. Next slide, please. So the protocol was initially published in 2012. It went under development for a couple of years, and the timing was ideal given the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in 2011, enabling for rapid response and quantification of the impacts of that event. And over time, there have been a series of iterations in both the protocol materials, training materials, data sheets, the database, in response to kind of partner asks, needs, and interests, and as well as scientific assessment of the data itself and emerging best practices. Next slide. Oh, actually, go back, excuse me. There should have been a pop-up there. So to date, there have been 443 sites surveyed, over 9,000 surveys in 21 US states and Puerto Rico, And increasingly, there has been international interest and participation from 9 other countries. Next slide, please. So there are 2 protocols depending on sort of the goals and the context that our partners are working in. The first is accumulation, which in both cases, the data are collected in a 100-meter stretch of shoreline perpendicular to the water, and then the distance from the water to the back barrier of the beach is measured, so we get a full sense of the area of the survey. And in the accumulation approach, all debris that is greater than 2.5 centimeters is removed and then counted and categorized by material and type using kind of a standardized list. And our partners have the option to create also custom items that are more specific and of interest or concern in their local area. But it all maps to this kind of fixed, manageable, standardized list. Next slide. The standing stock approach also takes place within a 100-meter site, but rather than comprehensively surveying and removing all debris within that 100 meters, each survey involves searching 5-meter wide transects that are randomly located within that 100 meters. Same thing, 2.5 centimeters and greater, classify, categorize, count. Next slide, please. We're actually combining the 2 protocols going forward. So all of the survey data that exists so far is either that accumulation or standing stock, but we are moving toward a unified protocol where that subsampling approach will be applied, but rather than leaving debris in place, which is what was required in the standing stock survey, which is not very compatible with a cleanup ethic, is to be able to remove debris, but also use this standardized search area, which lends itself to data quality and consistency across sites and time. Next slide, please. So there have been a great diversity of partners and outcomes. Just wanted to highlight that here. Next slide. And the data have been used in a variety of ways. So we have a publicly accessible database. People enter data themselves and can request, and anyone can request an account to download the data. We're in the process actually of transitioning to a new database that will have an API, which will add to access and the ability for people to customize interaction with the data set. But thus far, we've had a lot of sort of local community-based driven projects in which a preventative kind of project was developed, and then monitoring was used in order to evaluate the effectiveness of an outreach campaign or a mitigation effort. And then those efforts combined have been used to look at larger patterns. For example, the efficacy of container deposit legislation for single-use beverage bottles in the US. And this paper here notes that there was a 40% reduction in containers found on beaches in states that did have container deposit legislation. So looking forward to answering folks' questions and to continue the conversation. Next.
Thank you, Hilary. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kolar, and I'm the outreach manager for the International Coastal Cleanup managed through Ocean Conservancy's Trash Free Seas program. So today I will be speaking primarily about this, our main citizen science data collection effort. Next, please. There we go. So the International Coastal Cleanup, it's really been the backbone of our program work for all 35 years of the ICC, as I'll refer to it. And really the founders of the ICC, where it all began back in 1986 on the Texas Gulf Coast in the United States, the founders had the foresight to know how important it would be to track the items that were collected by volunteers. So we really have amassed a really rich data set of citizen science collected marine debris data along shorelines, and then now, of course, with inland waterways as well. So what you see here is just some cumulative stats of what this global community has already accomplished. And really all of this work wouldn't be done each year if it weren't for a network of coordinating partners that we have all over the world that represent some 150 plus countries and growing. And as you can see in the photos, volunteers go out in whatever way they can, and they clean up in whatever way they can. So the majority of our cleanups are on foot or on shorelines, inland waterways as well, but volunteers are also going out in their communities underwater and collecting debris off seafloor, and then also by boat. Next slide, please. So the International Coastal Cleanups data collection processes, there are two that I'll talk briefly about today. In the background of this slide here is our volunteer ocean trash data card. So just our paper data card that, as you might imagine, has evolved over the 35-year history, especially in the last 5 to 10 years as the science has really exploded on this topic, and we're learning more and more through the science and really feedback from volunteers over the years as well. So that what you see here on the screen is our most current data card, which we print and send all over the world in probably I think about 15 different languages at this point. So this is what we send out to our partners, who then galvanize and work with their networks on the ground to make cleanups happen. And I should say that the International Coastal Cleanup traditionally has been held on or around the third Saturday of September each year. So we do have that really nice kind of routine tradition of this annual season of which volunteers are really heading out, and we get a lot of data around that time of the year. And so you'll see on the front side of the data card there, it's a little small to see, and I'll show you in a future slide more details, but site information is collected by the volunteer and also the cleanup organizers. And then the flip side of that is really getting to itemized data or characterization of the debris collected. This is mainly macro debris. These are volunteer events where sometimes there's hundreds or thousands of volunteers that our partners are managing. So really we get the best data when it's the larger debris, and it's as simple and easy to use as possible. So this process is all about simplicity and all about the average person being able to track and tally those data and work in teams to do so. So that's what's on the flip side of the data card. In the center and the foreground you see here is our new app, CleanSwell, which I guess I shouldn't say new anymore. It's about 6 years old now. And next slide, please. The development of CleanSwell was really in an effort not only to make the data collection process of the ICC move into the 21st century, but this app for us was also a way to let the average person who's walking his or her shoreline, walking their waterway, maybe on a daily basis. You know, we've heard from so many of our partners that volunteers are eager to get out year round and collect these important data. So this is what CleanSwell also captures. And you can see here is a close-up of the collection screen. This is really the bulk of the app, and very easy to use, tapping on icons. The most common litter items that we've found and we've determined over the 35-year history set of the ICC has really helped inform this app. And it's fun. There are fun badges that users earn, and it really motivates people to get out year round and feel empowered to collect those data. As we have found that, you know, the International Coastal Cleanup, we still do have these really large, wonderful events that take place in a non-COVID environment, but we're also finding that it's a little bit more decentralized now, and we want to make sure that we accommodate and make tools for those volunteers that are going out and maybe just doing a cleanup of 1 or 2 people. So this tool was really designed for them as well. And as you can see, we emphasize that it can be used year round, and it can also be used in remote locations where there might not be cellular service. Next slide, please. So here's the process in a nutshell. Oh, sorry, my colors on the slide got a little wonky, but you can see some of the screenshots here. And really, what I just want to mention is that a lot of the data that are collected in the metrics that are collected on the paper data card mirror very similarly into the app here. And what's the beauty of the app is that it does a lot of the legwork for the volunteer. We do find that obviously with all of us being familiar with citizen science data, there can very easily be gaps in the information, and that's understandable. You know, volunteers out on their shoreline, they might not really have enough sense of how far they walked, for instance, or the area that they might have covered, or really they might not have a scale to weigh the total debris that they collected. But the app really does this for them. There are some built-in features, especially using the device's internal GPS to track the distance that the volunteer covers to really get more accurate data as well, and have the data more efficiently feed into this online open access database where all international coastal cleanup and clean swell data go. And that's what you see here at the end. Next slide. And this is just a screenshot of the home screen. Our ocean trash database we call Tides. It is online open access. That was, you know, one of the main goals of us developing the app, was that we wanted the data to be accessible. So we do work with scientists, everyone from professional scientists to student researchers to people looking at policy implementation and effectiveness, and really everyone in between, to have access to and have these data at their fingertips so that they're actually used. And we try to emphasize that to our ICC partners and coordinators, that, you know, let your volunteers know that their data are important and they're being used every day. Next slide, please. I think this might be my last one. I'll wrap it up quickly. This is a little bit more detail of the type of information that we're already having our cleanup organizers and volunteers collect. So they're getting a good sense of the location. And as I mentioned earlier, traditionally we have recorded the distance that the volunteers or the volunteer group covers. So we're really excited to talk to all of you guys today about ways that, you know, through all of our different methodologies, we could just make small changes, small edits, and really small asks to our networks in order to get to this plastic debris density that we're all aiming for and striving for with this 14.1.1b metric. So, you know, I put a little note here in the bottom. For us, that might just mean simply asking our coordinators to get a rough idea, give us a sense of the area covered, because we're already getting plastic pieces collected. So I feel like the hard part for us is really done, and it sounds like through the other methodologies we're already there as well. So we're really excited to hopefully have the international coastal cleanup data be as useful and impactful as possible. Next, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you very much to all of the speakers for those wonderful presentations. We have a bit of time for Q&A, even though we're slightly behind, so I will take two questions that came in from the chat. The first is from Sarah Nelms. How do you recommend the variation in citizen science effort, for example, number of people cleaning the beach, is taken into account when analyzing the data? This is important to be considered when comparing the data across various locations. Thank you. So I would invite anyone from the 3 citizen science projects to begin, and then Danny may have some thoughts to share as well.
This is Hilary Burgess from NOAA. I'm glad that you asked that question. It is extremely important. We actually did a recent kind of massive analysis of the MDMAP data set and found that the largest driver of the quantity of debris in a survey was the number of people who were conducting it in using that method, the accumulation method, where you're searching the entire 100 meters. Which is one reason that we are moving towards doing a subsampling approach, so that the amount of effort that folks are using to conduct the search is more comparable site to site. In terms of assessing that between different survey methodologies, I believe that as long as the number of participants is recorded, that can be taken into account, as you point out, because we do expect that the detection rate would be increased the more people are out conducting the search.
Thank you, Hilary. Would anyone else like to jump in?
Hi, this is Mustafa from the European Environment Agency. So the number of people making the surveys is so hard, very hard issue to control. We don't have a control in that in citizen science. And the important thing is applying the protocols. Then this also reveals itself in the quality check. So some citizen science surveys varies from 10 meter to 1,000 meters beach strips, where we look, of course, more on the standardized way of 100 meters. But the answer in short is this is not very possible. So that's why citizen science also has some gaps and also some pros and cons. This is one of the areas that we don't have a control over it.
Hi, this is Sarah. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think from our point of view, you know, Mustafa has a great point. It's hard to really control how many people get out, especially at our events. So just taking that into account as we do our standardizations and looking at, you know, how we take all of our different data and standardize them to be at least on the same kind of playing field is where we're looking. And we've done a little bit of internal kind of discussions around, if it is a cleanup of one, you know, what does that area look like versus, and density of debris looks like versus a cleanup of 500, and maybe capturing area differently through those different scenarios.
Thanks very much to the three panelists. Danny, do you have anything to add, or would you like to wait for later?
I think for the total number of volunteers or the total number of people doing the cleaning, we will not have control over the total number of people, but the higher the number of people doing the cleanup, in my opinion, can enhance the density, can enhance the area covered, can enhance, you know, like instead of doing maybe 100 meters, we can do a square kilometer, or we can do a square, you know, like a bigger area during the cleanup. We will not have control over the total number, but the higher number we have of people doing the cleanup, the better geographical distribution, area covered, and so on. Thank you.
May I add one thing?
Please.
It's more important really in this point that the guidelines are strictly implemented and the participants are having a short training and they have people inside the groups who knows who did it before. Otherwise, we see that some of the participants which are not aware of the guidelines and which are not aware of the objective collect many unnecessary items, and they also record it in a wrong way. So it's important here is the supervising, not the number of people. A few number of people can do a big area survey very effectively if they are determined. A huge number of people can create even some conflict and confusion. So we cannot take it as a direct indicator. And we shouldn't forget that citizen science data is supplementary data, where real monitoring data does not exist. Is usually also the situation on Earth. And we should understand that there will be some situations that we cannot standardize.
Thank you all. That was a wonderful discussion. We have one more question that I would invite the three citizen science projects to briefly address. This is from Sven Schade, who rightly recognizes that UNEP's participation in this discussion is a bit of a top-down approach, and then asks, are there plans or strategies to promote the use of citizen science data also at national and regional levels, i.e. before global integration?
Well, I can certainly speak to the US and say that in the same way that there are a variety of different approaches internationally, there are a variety of different approaches nationally here, and attempts to pull the different streams of information, whether it's opportunistic or standardized or conducted in a cleanup context or in a strictly survey context. Those are challenging, but there are, I think, different reasons to use each approach, and with kind of thoughtful design and discussion, it's possible to bring those different sources together. In terms of top-down and sort of enforcement of monitoring, I wouldn't say that that is happening at a national level, but there's certainly encouragement and sort of incentives for organizations to adopt a monitoring program.
Thank you, Hilary. Any thoughts from anyone else? Mustafa, I noted that you were discussing the role of the eModeNet database and that your data was already being used in certain EU policies, perhaps at the national or regional level.
Yeah, and this requires a huge amount of effort, because first, it was not the situation that the member states did not look this issue very positively. They thought that citizen science data is something that's just for awareness raising. But I see that as long as we really standardize our efforts, quality checks, and our monitoring efforts, and we use especially the NGO networks, then the data can be taken very seriously. And then also we need to quality check our data and also prove that it has very much comparability with the official monitoring efforts, where I believe that this data, as much as now we are discussing with eModeNet and the European Commission to use Marine Litter Watch data for some countries which don't have official monitoring on beach litter. So we came from a point that our data was excluded and crucified in many occasions by the scientific community on the member states. Now they're asking for the data because it's an expensive effort. And this is great that our NGOs are so much glad that they are contributing. And this also helps the awareness rising and the ownership of the issue. And for also UN SDGs, we would like that these efforts should be utilized and shown as a part of the SDG monitoring. And the most important area, one of the most important data availability exists already for a decade for beach litter. And this would be so nice. The efforts on this area are so valuable.
Thanks for that intervention. And this is a great segue into part 2, where we'll hear from 3 member states and dive deeper into the national perspective. I just wanted to check whether Sarah has anything to add first.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thanks to everybody who provided their input during the first half of this session. The next 3 speakers, Camden Howitt from Litter Intelligence, Catherine Mbasi from the National Environmental Management Authority in Kenya, and Rachel Bowers from Ghana Statistical Service, will share their successes and plans for getting citizen science data used in official reporting processes, both considering opportunities as well as discussing potential barriers. Camden, Catherine, and Rachel, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good evening to distinguished attendees and our team here. Pleasure to be here today and to present this subject. So a big part of the work that we've been doing here at Sustainable Coastlines for our last sort of 12 years of operation, and we're an NGO based in New Zealand, working around the Pacific Islands, is in cleaning up beaches. And initially we didn't work in citizen science nor really understand the capability and capacity for citizen science to address the issues that we're fighting. But what we did see was that communities were really affected by marine litter, and they weren't really able to contribute to or be involved in, you know, the data and the evidence that were then having such a huge impact on the solutions, both from a sort of product design, business and policy perspective, that were then impacting the communities that they lived in. So we wanted to design a program that would allow those communities to get really, really deeply involved in reporting and data collecting and connecting with their local coastline, but doing that reporting and monitoring at a really, really high level. Next slide, please. So we came up with a program called Litter Intelligence, and that program is now operating and has been for the last 3 years or so. And that program really has its core around inspiring and informing better decisions for a world without litter. And it has 2 core elements. The citizen science program is the key that I'm here to talk to today. And that's really about long-term and scientifically rigorous data. So we're using the UNEP IOC marine litter guidelines. We've created a localized adaptation to those, and we run training workshops around the country to onboard communities into that program. And through that, we've established New Zealand's first national litter database, and that's ongoing litter monitoring quarterly at each of the beach sites that we work at. Alongside that program, and sort of really importantly, we've focused a huge amount of our effort in schools and developing a holistic schools education program that is between 1 and 2 terms long, that involves the school students around the country in citizen science activities, trains them in those sort of monitoring, observation, and other scientific skills, and builds that into the education curriculum, as well as, you know, empowering those students as, I suppose, local activists creating action projects within their own communities as part of that education program. Next slide, please. So a huge part of the design and the development and rollout of this program has been our really, really tight collaboration with government partners. And so initially the funding came actually through a conversation that was had at the UN SDG 14 conference in New York in 2017, where I launched the concept of this through a voluntary commitment. But I had an ad hoc conversation with a delegate from New Zealand there, from our Ministry for the Environment, and that kicked off a process of gaining funding for this. So we have a 3-year fund, which we're coming to the end of in another 6 months or so, through the Ministry for the Environment. We also have worked very, very tightly with our statistics department, so our National Statistics Office, Stats NZ, in the co-design of the data quality assurance and controls for the program. And between the MFE, Ministry for the Environment, and Statistics New Zealand, they run the official National Environmental Monitoring Program. So we've been very much in touch with them on how to integrate these data into the National Reporting Program. The Department of Conservation is our national conservation entity, and we've worked with them on the co-design of the adaptation of the UNEP IOC methodology and any changes that have come up through usage over the years. Next slide, please. So to date, and this is in 2.5 or so years of the program's operation, we've set up long-term monitoring at 186 beaches. 185 of those are in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and 1 in Samoa through a demo we provided at the Pacific Environment Forum with SPREP in Samoa last year. And so those 186 beaches are monitored. And now it's being set up to monitor every 3 months, so quarterly. So we have 585 surveys completed there so far, and a huge amount of effort is actually put into ensuring that we monitor volunteer effort as well. Both time and individuals are captured during both the survey phase on the beach and the audit phase, you know, back in the back room. Litter density and litter flux are our core measures during those 3-month surveys, and so that time series allows us to calculate flux. And our litter density, just out of interest, is currently sitting at about 350 items per 1,000 square meters at the sites we have around the country. So plastics is around 73% of that. Next slide, please. So we've had a number of really interesting successes of that data being then used for various different projects. So in terms of community action, we've been working with the WWF here in New Zealand on supplying data as evidence as part of a ghost fishing campaign to prevent fishing industry plastic waste. We've been working with various different community advocacy groups. I know of a couple that have used their data and environment court appeals against aquaculture industry expansion. So looking at fishing data again there. We worked with Greenpeace and another entity, Kiwi Bottle Drive, to integrate the data into written submissions to Parliament on container deposit legislations that were being proposed and are actually in a really positive light now being designed in part due to that data submission. And in a sort of a fun context, we've worked with PlayStation on designing a game on the PlayStation 4 Dreams platform, so that gives access to tens of millions of game players around the world to the data, and that's a game based on citizen scientists running around the beach collecting litter and then comparing that data with real data at those beach sites. Next slide, please. We've also had some really interesting successes when it comes to government reporting and then action on this issue. So, for example, in October 2019, the report on the far left-hand side, our marine environment, that was working alongside our NSO, Stats NZ, and Ministry for the Environment to integrate marine litter into our official reporting cycle for the very, very first time. So that was the first time marine litter had ever been reported at that highest reporting level in New Zealand, and also the very first time that citizen science data had been reported at that highest level. So a massive win for the cause and for opening that barrier to citizen science reporting at a national level. The Rethinking Plastics report was a report done through the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor last year. Already we've seen 3 different pieces of legislation proposed that have come out of that, and our data was used, and we consulted on that report. We had the problem plastics policy consultation, which is the sort of second report you see there, come out this year, and that proposes the banning of 7 different single-use plastic items by 2023, of which our data were used in the public consultation documentation extensively. And then on the right-hand side, we have submitted data to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and they have, as of mid last year, submitted New Zealand's first voluntary national review of the Sustainable Development Goals, which included a couple of pages on the program to understand where we could find the data and report on the data for SDG 14.1.1. And Dilek, I know, is on the call as well, and we heard from earlier on, and Gillian Campbell and others authored a paper that came out earlier this year in Sustainability Science, referencing litter intelligence as one of, I think there's only 5 programs around the world that currently can contribute data to the SDGs, and litter intelligence was referenced as one of those. So it was a sort of an honour to be considered at that level, and looking forward to continuing to be able to do so and inform other programs where possible. Last slide, I think, is next. So challenges and next steps, really where we can, I suppose, gain some learnings on this. It's not an easy journey, this project, but it is a really rewarding one. And I think we know there's a lot more work to be done. I think probably the core outtake here is working with the National Statistics Office at that design phase right from the very beginning was probably our biggest learning, and encourage anyone looking at a program like this to do so. An obvious challenge right now is COVID. We weren't able to complete any surveys with our citizen scientists throughout lockdown, and we don't know, we're not currently in lockdown, and we hope we don't return to that stage, but that risk is always there. Sustainable funding is the biggest question we get asked in these types of presentations, and it's a real challenge to move past particularly as an NGO, to move past a 1-year or 3-year funding cycle on contestable funding. So we're actually working with a couple of our major financial institutions and banks on developing an environmental impact bond or an impact investment strategy to help us move into a sort of a decades-long cycle as opposed to a 1 to 3 year cycle for funding. Cultural adaptation is incredibly important. We have a massive multicultural society here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but also around the world. And how do we make sure that we're sensitive around cultural sites on coastlines? Cultural health indicators are another great monitoring opportunity, and providing language support across the technology is really important too. We've already developed large aspects of cross-domain application for this program. So we've developed the facility for citizen scientists to enter data in a freshwater context alongside rivers, and a stormwater context in stormwater catch pits as well. And we're working on integrating terrestrial litter data capture as well. We've already worked with Microsoft on developing AI tools to support the citizen science experience, so automating categorization and count through image recognition software. We're still developing that. We would love to move as understanding how we can identify sources and start to solve this issue in an even faster way through technology. And then whether we can roll out to an international context. This is already ready, as I mentioned, and accessible internationally. In Samoa, we have one site there, but we're looking to post in a post-COVID world when borders are less restricted, to start to work further, particularly around the Pacific first. I believe that's it. Thank you.
Good evening. It's evening in Nairobi, but I know it's morning in other places. I'm going to speak about what we found out in monitoring and assessing marine litter and microplastics at the Kenyan coast. Next slide, please. I work for the National Environment Management Authority, and we did this work in collaboration with the UNEP and the other partners, where we wanted to prepare a national source inventory, which would be bring linkages with the SDG 14. And we would be interested to look at the data on the sources, pathways, and accumulation of marine litter and microplastics. We were hoping that we would be able to use this to develop the national source inventory that would form a baseline for all the marine litters in the country, and more so at the Kenyan coast. We were looking at one of the pathway being one of the rivers that flows from, or the river basin that flows from the main city of Nairobi all the way to the Kenyan coast of Mombasa. Next slide, please. We were hoping that if we did this study, it would help to enhance our understanding of the sources of marine litter, the pathways, where and the set of marine litter plastics. And like I've said, we were going to focus on one of our rivers, which flows from that is one is called Nairobi River, and then the other river, and flows all the way to the Kenyan coast, because these rivers are they flow through the major population where we think that marine litter would be the source. Because of our waste management systems, most of the waste would be coming from the city and along the towns that are found along these river basins all the way up to the coast. We are also hoping that when we have done this study, it's going to inform relevant policy that would guide the management of marine litter plastics. Then we'd also want to develop maybe a regulation or a legislation to manage all the marine litter. And more so, we want to develop a national action plan that would help in the management of marine litter. And we will also want to have some form of communication on communication and outreach programs, so that we can address the sources and different sources along the river or in the country. We would need that require legislation or would require an awareness or outreach program. We will have to come up with such programs to address these issues. Regarding the National Environment Management Authority, which I'll be calling NEMA, we abbreviate as NEMA, we would also want to increase the capacity for the institution to manage marine litter, because one of the things that, or one of the mandates of the authority is to manage waste, all forms of waste in the country. We are the regulatory agency that manages all the waste. This includes marine litter. So we hope that once this project is done, we will be able to get enough data that will help the development of action plan, come out with the outreach programs, but also build the capacity of NEMA in terms of knowing what should be regulated, what should be also maybe what kind of infrastructure we need to put in place, what kind of management programs we need to put in place to address the pathways and also the accumulation of marine litter, and more so the microplastics that arise from the plastics in the environment. Next slide, please. From this, we started off very well. I think we started off having the first stakeholders workshop, that is the first inception workshop, which brought together all the stakeholders in this program. NEMA, we were driving this process. We brought together stakeholders from the source of the city. Like I have said, these rivers start from the city of Nairobi and make their way through various regional or ecosystems up to the Kenyan coast. That's about a stretch of over 500 kilometers all the way up to the coast. So we brought together stakeholders, administrators, technical officers that fall along the river. That's right from the city, all the administrative governments along the river, and up to the coastal counties. Our administrative governments are in terms of counties and national government. So we brought the national government and the county government together to our initial workshop, where we were able to discuss the projects, the aspiration of the projects, and the role of all the stakeholders, and the kind of involvement we want them to do, and they also solicit for their support so that they can participate, they can give their resources, their time, their expertise to be able to participate in this project. And the support was quite good. We got quite commitments from already stakeholders who are working, who are already doing some work in this. Stakeholders who already have some capacity. For example, we got support from the county government, from the city, which is in my view where we get quite a number of quite a lot of marine that is transported along the way up to the ocean. That is where the land-based activities occur a lot. So we also brought the coastal counties together, and we got their buy-in before we started. Now, we also held a training workshop. This was coordinated by UNEP, by WIOMTA, and that helped us also to training. We also had an in-country training on measuring marine litter plastics, and this was held at the coastal countries. We also brought together all the stakeholders that were in the inception workshop to undergo this training so that they know how to measure marine litter using the different methodologies that have been tested, and which we also applied in our country. And the results were quite good. Next slide, please. Okay, this was our first inception workshop, which was held in the town. We had quite a number of stakeholders, government, civil society organizations, and all other regulators came on board. Next slide. Now, I want to speak a little bit about the training that we held. The aim was to see how we can establish monitoring programs to address the need for quality data, and also have effective monitoring of land and sea-based sources, quantities, and also look at the impact of data and strengthen the capacity of all the members to use evidence-based approach to decision-making and global initiative. That was the aim of that. Next. We covered a lot of training using together with our stakeholders, that is Kenya Marine and Fisheries Resource Institute, and they are based at the coast. That's where we held this training, and they have quite a number of equipment that we were able to use because they are at the base. They have done some work in marine, so they hosted us together with our trainers, and we were able to go through different methodologies, and we actually were introduced to the monitoring of the shoreline biota and using different methods to sample the different areas, looking at the sea surface, looking at the sea floor, looking at even at the water, and checking what kind of plastics we get at the biota, looking at what kind of plastics is there at the seashore, what kind of plastics we find at the seashore, and more so even looking at the microplastic. What was interesting really was the microplastics that is found in the clear water that looks so clear, but when you look at it under the microscope, you found that there was quite some microplastics that cannot be seen by the naked eyes. And we also looked at activities by our different stakeholders that we can go, that is coming up with the action plans, so that when we went back to our institutions, we came up with plans that address all these issues. Next slide. We also had another training, that is the National Marine Litter Data Collection. This was a 10-day training exercise that focused on our in-country. The other training of TOTs was regional, so we only had a few of us, say Kenyans, participating. But this one, we focused on our local experts or local technical officers to build their capacity in marine litter monitoring along the Kenyan coast. But as we did this, we also were simultaneously collected some data that would form a strong baseline that we can say maybe this is how our coastline looks like in terms of marine litter. So this was also a very interesting training exercise that gave us a lot of info in terms of how to monitor and assess marine litter at the Kenyan coast, and coming a little bit in the inland, following the riverine, the way that I explained, that we have a river that flows from Nairobi all the way up to the Kenyan coast. Next, please.
Catherine, this is Anne moderating.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We have to take a break now and move to the next presenter because we're running out of time, but we will post your slides to the event report out page and make sure that we are sharing them with everyone so that they can see your full message. If you would like to conclude with any key messages, I think that would be wonderful. And then I think we'll hand it over to Rachel if that's all right.
Okay, thank you very much. What I would say is that the results were quite interesting, and they were used to inform the global data sets, which we hope, and for us as a country, formed our baseline, which we can now say at least we have information we can Thank you very much.
That's a great message. Thank you. Rachel, over to you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for the presentation so far. It's been great to hear from both Catherine and Catherine of projects that are further down the line than Ghana is in exploring this citizen science space. So I'd like to just quickly go through what our motivation is in using citizen science for the SDGs. Next slide, please. So I work as an ODI fellow with the Ghana Sdg Scope service, working with Mr. Omar Seydou on the SDG Secretariat. So when Ghana published its first voluntary national review last year, only 3 indicators were reported from goals 13, 14, and 15. It shows that our traditional ways of collecting data in Ghana do not cover many of the environmental indicators that we want to be working towards reporting on. This is of great concern. And so as part of our data collection, we have looked at alternative methods of non-traditional data sources. This was born out of a data roadmap forum that was held in 2018, where we brought together 150 policymakers in Ghana to generate the and last year, into law with the Statistical Service Act was passed, meaning that we can now have the mandate that we can publish this as part of our official statistics. Next slide, please. And so, as we've been looking at as one of the routes, please, next slide. So the citizen science project that we're working on is with Philip, who you heard from earlier, and it was motivated by the mapping citizen science methodologies to the SDGs. So we looked at this, the results, and saw that over a third of indicators have potential to be contributed to from SDGs, and have identified these 3 shown on screen at the moment as the priorities which Ghana Statistical Service would like to begin with. So the plastic debris density, particularly the beach litter, the mountain green cover index, and the change in extent of water-related systems. For the final 2, we already have some satellite data that we are using towards reporting, and we are using citizen science as a verification method for these other data sources. But for plastic debris density, we found that there is already extensive work happening in the country that we want to tap into as a national statistical office. Next slide, please. And so there's already been much kind of work on marine litter within Ghana already. The president himself last year signed up to the Global Plastic Action Partnership, the first nation in Africa to do so, and many programs are starting around tackling marine litter. But actually, there's already been a significant data collection movement that's been happening for over a decade now. And the methodology we've been using is the ICC Ocean Conservancy that was spoken about by Sarah earlier. And so even just between 2015 and 2018, we have 25 cleanups on record with over 7,000 volunteers. Next slide, please. And so how are we looking to approach this? We want to strengthen our local data ecosystem by using those who are already involved. We know that going from currently reporting around a certain SDG indicators to where we want to be as a National Statistics Office means that we need to really pull on those networks that are already operating within the space. In terms of political will, as I mentioned, there is a priority around plastics and single-use plastics in particular. And we also have this mandate as the National Stats Office to look at new data sources. In addition to this, as part of this pilot project, the Citizen Science for SDGs project, we brought together relevant ministries, academics, and CSOs in a policy roundtable to try and nationalize the priorities for this SDG indicator. And through that, there was a general buy-in and an idea that the results from this pilot could even feed into the ocean plan that is being developed by the Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology. And so when we talk about existing networks, the beach cleanups that we mentioned through ICC have been happening through a group of CSOs, but in particular, Smart Nature Freaks have been working on this since 2009. They have a vast network of volunteers who are already using the Clean Swell app. I won't spend much time on this because we briefly looked at this earlier, but in Ghana, we're using the data cards in areas where there may not be so much phone signal or digital inclusion, and then in some areas also the Clean Swell app. This is just a brief visualization from the Earth Challenge data set where they have brought together this, the data that Ghana was contributed through the ICC. So as a final slide, I'd just like to wrap up by saying in Ghana, there is a political will that we want to use citizen science as part of our official reporting. We have a network ready to be activated. We have an existing methodology that we're using in country, but we are looking for guidance in how the methodology that we are using already could become official, or any adjustments we need to do in order that we can mobilize a network to explore the use of citizen science for the SDGs. So thank you for your presentation so far, and we look forward to where this leads Ghana in future. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks to everybody who shared their perspectives. We do have a few questions, but because we're running out of time, what we're going to do is actually archive these and then share them along with the event report out. So the speakers have agreed to answer these questions offline. I will now turn it over to Danny for the final intervention and then offer a few thoughts as closing.
Thank you, Anne. Just a quick presentation on data findings. I have actually worked on the 3 citizen science data sets. Level 2 beach litter, average count of plastic items per kilometers. I have downloaded the 3 data sets and tried to aggregate the data at a national level per country in order per year in order to be able to see if we can get the average count of plastic items per square kilometers. Next, okay, it's already on. The 3 citizen science data sets were listed in the previous slide. Can we move next slide, please? I have used the step-by-step approach with the 3 different data sets, calculating the total area in square meters by multiplying the total widths and total lengths. In some instance, like some data sets didn't have the total widths, so I have added one in order to calculate the area. I have also aggregated the total square meter by country per year per event type in order to get the aggregated total. Then calculated the total area in square kilometer, which is the total area in square meter divided by 1 million. Next slide, please. And I have found one country with the marine under the marine litter watch for 2017 that has some data above 1 square kilometers. For tides, I have for NOAA, sorry, I have found multiple countries like Australia, Canada, China, Malaysia, and the United States. And for now, I have found only some records for United States from 2015 to 2018. Can you move next, please? Next slide, please. One more. Yeah, this is a conclusion and recommendations. Actually, based on the findings, working with this data sets, I have realized that the cleanups are repetitive in some locations. We need to enhance the geographical distribution of the cleanups, align the cleanup methodology with the GAZAM guidelines for monitoring and assessment of plastic litter in the ocean, include the width of the cleaned areas to calculate the area in square meter before converting to square kilometers, increase the density of the cleanups, disaggregate the cleanups. In some instances, we have, let's say, with Titus, we have land cleanup, including beach, shoreline, and inland. We need to disaggregate these cleanups. Maybe we can include beach and shoreline separated from inland cleanup. Aggregate, maybe was possible if we don't have enough data to aggregate at national level. Maybe we can combine the cleanups done by the three different citizen science projects. Can aggregate them at a national per year in order to get the required area for the calculation. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. This is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. That was a wonderful wrap up. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Just to close with a quick summary. We first heard from 3 citizen science projects that talked about the immense on-the-ground capacity in terms of people ready to contribute, and also excellent data protocols and methodologies already in place. We also heard from 3 countries that are at various stages of using citizen science data for SDG reporting, demonstrating success already, partnerships with UNEP and others, and then also political will. And lastly, we heard from Danny that there is ample opportunity for additional member states to use data collected through these methodologies, probably beginning in 2021. Moving forward, we have a number of concrete next steps. UNEP is working with the Ocean Conservancy on a practical how-to manual that will take lessons learned from this workshop and create actionable guidelines for different citizen science projects who already have data or maybe collecting new data to more closely align that information with SDG reporting without requiring them to make too many changes to their existing protocols. We will continue to support YASA's work on understanding the contributions of citizen science to the SDGs, as well as pilot implementation activities in areas including Ghana. And then lastly, on the UNEP front, this workshop is part of a much larger program. UNEP is leading the creation of a digital platform for the global partnership on marine litter called the GPML digital platform. And this will share data from citizen science projects, other sources of information, and also information related to education and outreach on a wide range of topics in marine litter and plastic pollution to support not only monitoring, but also action and eventually eradication of these issues. So please look forward to hearing more from us and our colleagues in 2021. And we wish you all a very productive and safe holiday season. Thank you again for joining today.